The Salem Witch Hunts, a chapter in American history filled with fear, hysteria, and tragic injustice. This dark period of paranoia in the late 17th century resulted in the deaths of innocent people, driven by superstition, religious zeal, and a society gripped by suspicion. But how did the events of 1692 unfold? What sparked such mass hysteria? Today, on Wonderwave, we dive deep into the dark history of the Salem Witch Hunts, unraveling the mystery of how an entire town turned on itself. To understand the Salem witch trials, we must first understand the world in which they occurred. Colonial New England in the late 1600s was a harsh and unforgiving place. The Puritan settlers, who made up the majority of Salem's population, lived in constant fear of sin, damnation, and the devil's influence. They believed that evil could manifest itself in the form of witches, people, usually women, who had made pacts with the devil in exchange for supernatural powers. Salem was a town marked by religious rigidity and strict social codes. In this deeply pious community, any deviation from Puritan beliefs or behavior was seen as a threat to the entire colony. This fear was amplified by the belief that Satan was actively working to undermine their holy mission. By the early 1690s, Salem was already a community under stress. A small, isolated town, its people faced the constant threat of Native American attacks on the frontier. Economic hardship, internal disputes, and personal grudges added to the tension. The town was divided between Salem Village, a rural farming community, and Salem Town, which was wealthier and more prosperous. These divisions fueled resentment, creating fertile ground for suspicion and fear. And then came the unexpected: illness, strange behavior, and accusations of witchcraft. It all began in January 1692 when two young girls, Betty Parris and Abigail Williams, the daughter and niece of Reverend Samuel Parris, began exhibiting strange symptoms. They would scream, throw fits, and contort their bodies in unnatural ways. Their condition baffled the local physician, who declared that the cause was not physical, it was supernatural. The girls, he claimed, were under the influence of witchcraft. It wasn't long before other young women in the village began showing similar symptoms. The fear of the devil's presence spread like wildfire. Desperate to explain the unexplainable, the girls began accusing people in their community of bewitching them. The first to be accused were three women on the fringes of society: Tituba, an enslaved woman in the Parris household; Sarah Good, a homeless beggar; and Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman who had not been to church in years. The fact that these women were outcasts made them easy targets for accusations of witchcraft. The trials begin. On March 1st, 1692, the accused women were brought before local magistrates to be examined. Under intense pressure, Tituba confessed. She claimed not only to be a witch, but also to have seen others in the village practicing witchcraft. Her confession confirmed the villagers' worst fears. The devil was indeed at work in Salem. With Tituba's confession, the witch hunt truly began. As the weeks passed, more and more people were accused of witchcraft. Old grudges, land disputes, and personal rivalries played a role in the accusations. People turned on their neighbors, driven by fear and a desire to protect themselves. Accusations were often based on so-called spectral evidence, the belief that a witch could send their spirit to torment others, even while their physical body was elsewhere. This type of evidence, which was impossible to prove or disprove, led to a cycle of paranoia and increasing numbers of arrests. The Court of Oyer and Terminer. By May of 1692, the situation had escalated to the point where a special court, the Court of Oyer and Terminer, was established to handle the growing number of cases. Presided over by Judge Samuel Sewell and Chief Justice William Stoughton, the court's mission was to root out witchcraft, and the accused were presumed guilty from the start. Of the 200 people accused, 30 were convicted and 19 were executed by hanging. One man, Giles Corey, was pressed to death with heavy stones after refusing to enter a plea. The trials were a frenzy of accusations, confessions, and convictions. Those who confessed were often spared, while those who maintained their innocence were sentenced to death. The Salem witch hunts were fueled by more than just superstition. At their core, these trials were a product of fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of the devil, and fear of losing control. Religion played a significant role as the Puritan faith saw the world in stark terms of good versus evil, with little room for ambiguity. But politics also had a hand in the madness. The leadership of Salem and the surrounding areas used the trials to consolidate power and maintain control over a frightened populace. The ministers of Salem, particularly Reverend Samuel Parris, stoked the flames of hysteria, using their influence to keep the witch hunt alive. By early 1693, the tide began to turn. The initial wave of hysteria started to wane, and public opinion shifted as prominent figures in the community, including Governor William Phips, began to question the legitimacy of the trials. The use of spectral evidence was called into doubt, and many began to see the trials for what they were, a tragic miscarriage of justice. In October 1692, Governor Phips dissolved the court of Oyer and Terminer, effectively ending the witch hunts. The remaining accused were either acquitted or had their trials postponed indefinitely, but for those who had been executed, it was too late. In the years that followed, many of those involved in the trials expressed regret. Judge Samuel Sewell publicly confessed his guilt in the wrongful convictions, and the colony later declared a day of fasting and soul-searching to atone for the tragedies that had occurred. The families of those executed were eventually compensated, though it was little comfort for the loss they had suffered. The Salem Witch Hunts remain one of the darkest moments in American history. They are a powerful reminder of the dangers of mass hysteria, unchecked authority, and the consequences of fear-driven justice. The Salem Witch Hunts stand as a cautionary tale of how quickly fear and suspicion can spiral out of control, and of how fragile justice can be in the face of hysteria. It is a story of innocent lives lost, of a community torn apart by fear, and of the enduring scars left on the American conscience. As we reflect on this dark chapter of history, we must ask ourselves, what can we learn from Salem, and how can we ensure that such a tragedy is never repeated? Thank you for joining us on Wonderwave as we explored the dark history of the Salem Witch Hunts. If you found this story intriguing, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with others who love uncovering the mysteries of history. Until next time.